guys had a good lunch. My name is Rachel Ong. I'm actually a licensed naturopathic doctor, and as one of our colleagues said earlier today, it's a type of medicine that's becoming more popular again, but not very well known, at least in the state of Nevada. So what a naturopathic doctor is we're trained as a doctor, a primary care physician, and we can treat patients the same way that a medical doctor or osteopathic doctor can do, but we're more limited on the prescription drugs and the surgery. So instead of having those as tools under our belt, we focus more on trying to figure out what's really going on with the patient, what the root cause of their disease is, and what we use other tools like nutrition, lifestyle suggestions, acupuncture, homeopathy, hydrotherapy, amongst other things. So we have a lot more natural tools under our belt, and the way I like to explain it to people is that naturopathic medicine is really a good blend of both Eastern and Western medicine, and we really integrated it together so that we can treat every patient individually and as a whole person instead of just focusing on this exact symptom in this moment. Today, I really wanted to talk to everyone about nutrition because most of us are stuck at home, and this is actually a really great opportunity for us to look at the foods that we're eating and what we can do to improve the nutritional value of the foods that we're eating and kind of maximize the immunity in our bodies so that in case we do catch any illnesses, our bodies are ready, well fortified with nutrients to battle the disease that we're dealing with. So with the first section of my topic, I wanted to talk about macronutrients, and it's really not that complicated. We don't have to look at all the individual vitamins or the minerals that we need, but we just focus on, the proteins, carbs, fats, fiber, that kind of thing. So a little background to the USDA food guides. It's been around since the early 1900s, and it's constantly evolving as we have more science and data to back up what we want to share with the general public about nutrition. So I grew up in the 90s where the food pyramid was the most prominent thing, and you see here the biggest portion of the diet recommendation at the time was carbs. And we actually know that that's not true anymore. You can read the individual timeline here on your own free time. I just wanted to point out the evolution of the pyramid, but where we're at now as of 2011, this is the current recommendation by the USDA. They changed the format to a plate to make it easier for consumers to kind of figure out the ratios of their food and to easier implement some of these suggestions. So the current recommendation is that half of your plate, doesn't matter how much food you eat, it should be more heavily based on vegetables and fruit. And when I say vegetables, it's not the starchy carb vegetables like potato. That's more in the carbs and grain portion. But your leafy potatoes, your leafy greens and beans and carrots, that kind of stuff, that's in your vegetable category. So 50% of that is vegetables and fruit. 25% is your grains, so your rice, cereals, any starchy vegetables that you might want to eat. That kind of falls into that category. And then protein is also 25%. So that could be meat, that could be plant-based protein. There's no judgment at all. Whatever lifestyle, whatever diet that you're comfortable with, as long as you have this ratio of 50% fruits and veggies, 25% carbs, and 25% protein, then you'll probably be on a really good track to improving your health already. Because right now, the typical American diet is more like 50% grains, 25% proteins, and 25% vegetables. And we know that that's not nearly enough vegetables or fruit in our diet to get all the nutrients that we need. They do include a little cup of dairy on this section. That's something that I personally don't agree with, but I'll talk about that later. And then another interesting way that they presented this guideline is with the 5 different colors, because one of the things I like to recommend to my patients is that you really need variety in your food in order to have a variety of nutrients in your body. If you're constantly eating the same thing all the time, you're stuck with only the nutrients of that one thing, and you're missing out on all the other things that your body might need. So a simple tip to kind of improve that is to look for 5 different colors in your food every day. Like, doesn't have to all be in one plate, but by the end of the day, if you could eat 5 different colors of food, then at least that's it's a good starting point to make sure that there's more variety in your diet. So this is the second page of the handout that the USDA has available for us, and it kind of gives you examples of what each category is, and then what one serving size looks like. You can read that on your own time. The main takeaway from this slide is this thing about drinking water instead of sugary drinks. I think this is in way too small of print. They should make this bigger, because that's actually a really common issue with a typical American consumer. We tend to not drink enough water, and most of the times when a patient comes into my office and says, oh, I have a headache, or oh, my muscles are really sore, or oh, I'm having trouble pushing my bowels out, like I feel really everything's stuck and constipated, I would say a majority of the time it's because they're not drinking enough water, and there's not enough fluids in their body to help kind of push everything out and make all your physiological functions run more smoothly. So definitely drink more water than you need to drink. A typical recommendation that I give people is take your body weight and drink half of that in ounces. So if you are a 100-pound person, then every day you should be drinking at least 50 ounces of water per day to get enough fluids in your body to, move all the nutrients to where they need to go, flush out all the toxins that you don't want in your body anymore, and just kind of keep everything running more smoothly. Any questions about that portion before I move on?
I have one question.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, like, somebody who is like pretty healthy and doing well, like drinking water is really good, like just plain water. But like when sometimes like we have like sleeping issues and things like that, they do recommend more like electrolytes, like to put some like maybe like good sugar in your water, or like salt a little bit, so it can actually benefit your body more. So
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, is that true, or like because they were saying that like I try to stay away from Gatorade, when I'm just not feeling really well, but then I try to like supplement it with like fruits, or like I put salt in my water. So is that beneficial?
Yes, absolutely. I was gonna do a whole section about water, but then that would have spiraled into like another hour conversation. So I actually took it out. But generally speaking, water is very good for you. Not all water is created equal. You have like, tap water that might not be the cleanest, but you also have bottled water, which is bottled in these plastics with a ton of chemicals that can actually interrupt your immune system, your endocrine system. So there's a whole spectrum of it, and like for different people, one might be easier to handle than another. So I think some people say that you want reverse osmosis water because that's the cleanest, where they take everything, including all the minerals, all the chemicals out of the water, and it's in its purest form. People believe that that's actually the best for you, but in actuality, you need some minerals, healthy minerals in your water in order for your gut to actually absorb it. So if you don't have anything in your water, any minerals for your gut to bind to, the water kind of just runs right through you and doesn't really serve a huge purpose. So maybe as a next topic, I might go into all the different levels of water, what things to look out for when you're wanting to invest in a water filtration system. But yeah, as of now, if you can just increase the intake of your water, even if it's just tap, at this point, that's better than not drinking enough water overall. Is that a good explanation?
Yes, thank you
Okay.
so much.
No problem. Okay, so the only thing that I didn't really agree with the USDA is the part about dairy. I personally don't, I don't really know why, but humans are the only species of animals that actually drink other animals' milk. And I don't think our bodies were naturally designed for that. And there are studies that show that consuming cow's milk actually can provoke allergic reactions to a lot of different people. So this is the first study that I came across that kind of highlighted that. The link, the hyperlink is in the reference name. So when you get a copy of this presentation, feel free to click on that and it'll take you to the abstract of the journal article that talks about that. And if you go to PubMed and search this topic, there will be plenty of others that show kind of the same thing. But generally speaking, our body only has lactase like when we're younger because we're drinking our mother's milk, you know, human milk. And as we get older and we no longer need that milk, our natural body's level of lactase is actually lowered. And that's why as we become older, we tend to become more lactose sensitive or lactose intolerant. It's just because our body really doesn't need it anymore. So instead of consuming that glass of dairy as recommended in the USDA guide, I would replace that with water or a plant-based milk of some sort to get the fiber and the proteins out of that, as opposed to focusing on the cow dairy or other animals' dairy, if at all possible. Here is a list of resources for, yes.
So there are a lot of dairy substitutes out right now. Which one do you think is the best in terms of nutrition-wise and health-wise?
I'm not a big fan of substitute products or, like those fake, vegan cheeses or vegan, like fake meat products, because I feel like they tend to put other chemicals in there that they don't tell you about, and so that opens another can of worms and introduces other problems with it. I would say if you want to consume dairy, the ones that have less of a reaction to our body are like the goat's milk or like the animals that we don't consume regularly, so goat, lamb, elk, that kind of stuff. Just in general, not just for dairy, but for animal products in general, like the ones that aren't raised in the farm the conventional way and are less in our diet, these tend to have less of a reaction in our body just because we're not exposed to it as regularly. Does that help?
Yes, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to make one change for your diet without changing too much of what you're already consuming, like I don't want to force you to become vegan, I don't want to force you to become like a focus on a keto diet or anything like that. Whatever you're eating now, if you just change the ratios to the 50% fruits and veggies, 25% carbs, 25% protein, then that's already a very, very good starting point to improving your health. One of the biggest complaints that I hear from patients is that if they eat more fruits and vegetables, they feel like they get hungry very easily. And that's probably true, and that's okay. And the reason for that is because there's way less calories in fruits and vegetables than there are in your typical carbs and your proteins. But what that also means is you can make your plate bigger, keep the ratio, but just eat more food. And that'll help you reach your calorie count, and then you'll feel full longer. I think when I was using one of these apps about a year or two ago, I actually really like MyFitnessPal. I was tracking like every single food item that I ate, and it generated the breakdown of what my macros was. And I just kind of looked at it for the trend. I wasn't really forcing myself to stick to any ratios, but what was really interesting to me was that a whole head of cabbage was literally only 4 calories, and your standard recommendation is 2,000 calories per day. So a whole head of cabbage is very little calories, but on the flip side, you have a lot of nutrients in that cabbage that your loaf of bread wouldn't have. So you kind of have to think of the trade-offs in that. Like, yes, you're giving up the calories by eating more fruits and vegetables, but you're getting way more vitamins. And when you're doing that, you're also able to eat a bigger plate to hit you can eat more to hit that calorie count that you need to feel full. So if anyone wants to take it to another level and actually start tracking like all the nutrients of the food that you're eating, here are the top 5 apps that I found that were pretty helpful. This is an image of the MyFitnessPal app. The really cool thing about this is their database is enormous. You can type in like Starbucks, venti, pumpkin spice latte, and they will tell you the exact breakdown of how many calories it's in it, like how much fat, protein, carbohydrates, even the little vitamins. They go into like vitamin A, vitamin C, blah, blah, blah. Their database is very vast. And then the other cool thing about MyFitnessPal is like, if you're eating a packaged item and there's a barcode on the package, you can actually use this app to scan the barcode, and it'll just populate all the nutrition information on there for you. So you don't have to type it in individually or anything like that. So for people who really want to keep track of like every little food that you're eating to make sure you're hitting your macronutrients, and maybe kind of look at your micronutrients as well, that's a really good starting place for an app. These 3, My Macros, My Net Diary, and My Plate Calorie Counter, I think they're all variations of the same thing, just presented in a different way. So I encourage you to look at each of them, see which one suits your personality the best, and go with that. And then this last one, Start Simple with My Plate, is actually one that's done by the USDA. This one is different in that it helps you establish really small goals to go towards a more nutritious lifestyle. So you could set your goal for today, eat 1 piece of fruit and nothing else. And then as soon as you do it for that day, you check it off, and it makes you feel good about yourself because you accomplished a goal. And then, you know, you could do that every day. And then as you get used to one small change, you can add a new one to the list later on. And then, you know, you can keep adding to it. And it's a very like small goal-based kind of platform for you to play with. These are the hyperlinks to each of the apps, and then there's actually a link on this image, and that's the YouTube video tutorial of how MyFitnessPal works. You can click on that at your own free time, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure I linked everything so that you can play with the presentation later when you have it at home. Any questions about these apps? Oh, the other fun thing about MyFitnessPal is you can type in your age and then your weight goal, and then it'll auto-populate how many calories you need per day. And then as you're inputting your food, it'll deduct it from the total. And if you put in the time of exercise, it'll kind of keep track of how many calories you have left to play with for the day. So whether you're trying to gain weight or lose weight, it works both ways. If you're trying to gain weight, then your calories goal is probably going to be a little bit higher, and if you're trying to lose weight, then the calories goal will be lower. But yeah, it's just a really cool feature that most of these apps have, where you can just say, I want to be healthier by reaching this weight, and then they'll do all the calculations for you and kind of give you feedback on how to adjust your food intake to be able to do so. Okay, so the second thing I wanted to talk about was what you can do when grocery shopping. And so how can you make sure that what you're buying with your groceries, you're getting the most out of it as best as you can? So let's talk about pesticides. Nearly 70% of fresh produce in the US are actually contain potentially harmful chemical pesticides. And this is according to EWG's analysis, and this is the link to their report for the 2020. And then whether you're buying organic or conventionally grown foods, fruits and vegetables is very important for your diet. However, many crops contain pesticides. So even after washing, peeling, scrubbing, some of the chemicals are still going to be in your food. So glyphosate or Roundup is the most heavily used pesticide in the US, and they're found in a lot of grains and beans such as oats and chickpeas, and it's because not only are they using it to kill the insects on the harvest, but they're also using it as a pre-harvest drying agent. So they're just spraying it all over the crops to dry it out so that they can harvest it easier. So that's like another layer of pesticides that people don't think about that's on their food. I also gave you a link to the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. They actually have a journal, a scientific journal that kind of goes over different publications about specific chemicals. I don't really want to go into that, but that resource is available for you if you want to look into any specific chemicals, as there's probably like hundreds of them out there, and we would be here all day if we wanted to talk about them one by one. So why is it important to talk about pesticides in our food? People do say that, you know, your body's pretty strong, you can purge most of it out, and that's probably true. Some of the toxins, the toxic responses can be reversible, but some of them are irreversible. So you really want to pay attention to that, because if it's like filling a bucket of water. If you only put a little bit of water in, it's probably no big deal. But if you keep putting adding more and more water to the bucket, eventually it'll overflow. So it's the same concept with pesticides and chemical toxins. Like a little bit here and there, probably not going to hurt your body. Your body's pretty good at adapting and purging things that they don't want in there. But if you can constantly add it to your system, then eventually your body's going to be overworked, and it's not going to have a really good way of purging these toxins. And that would mean that all these things are going to stay in your body longer, and then it's going to create some sort of response to damage your body. So these are just a couple of slides that I borrowed from Dr. Marchese and Dr. Bain to talk about the different parts of your body that could be affected by various toxins. So this is just a quick image of the detoxification pathway. So like I was saying, in a perfectly normal, perfectly healthy body, your liver should be able to detox most of the chemicals that you're introducing to your body, but it also requires a ton of nutrients to do so. So if you're not getting the variety, if you're not getting all the nutrients, all of these nutrients that you need on a regular basis, then your liver is not set up to purge. So that's why we have to talk about variety. That's why we have to talk about eating whole foods, eating more nutritiously, and making sure you're really getting the most bang out of your buck when you're putting food into your body. And then yeah, this is just some direct pathways and indirect pathways of xenobiotics. Xenobiotic is just basically any foreign chemical that you put into your body that's normally not supposed to be there. And then here's a list of things that could happen to your body if you have too much exposure. So it could be just simple inflammation all the way down to immune suppression, neoplasia, which is on its way to becoming cancer. So something to think about. So here's some suggestions for what you can do to minimize exposure. The first thing is, if at all possible, buy organic. That's not realistic for everyone because organic food can be expensive, especially if the farmers are paying for that USDA organic certification. That's really why organic foods are more expensive, because they need to meet the criteria, be inspected on a regular basis to even have that certification and to put that label on their food. So a way to kind of balance that is, at the very least, you want to avoid the dirty dozens. And the dirty dozens is the top 12 produce that has the most pesticides on it in the US. And that list changes every year. So I encourage you to go to the ewg.org website to check on it from time to time, because I think even just like 2-3 years ago, the food with the most pesticide was actually apples. And now I think strawberries actually surpass that. So bare minimum, if you can't buy all organic, at least for these 12 items, make sure you actually do get organic. And then the ones that you don't have to worry about buying organic as much would be the Clean 15. Clean 15 are the 15 produce that have the least pesticide tested in them. So they're generally safe to eat, even if it's not organic. If you're buying beef, you want to make sure that the word grass-fed and grass-finished is also on the package, because that changes the composition of the way the cow, I guess the protein is, of what kind of nutrients gets absorbed into the cow's body and things like that. So this is an article that kind of goes like into detail about the difference between regular beef and the grass-fed, grass-finished beef. But generally speaking, the grass-fed, grass-finished is going to be more nutritious for you, because what they're being fed has less of the toxins, so they're not ingesting it as much. So if they don't have as much in their body when you're eating them, then you won't have as much in your body. As far as seafood goes, if you can get wild caught, that's more ideal than farm raised. There's an article that kind of outlines the difference between farm raised and wild caught. There's a lot of controversy about if it's actually significantly different, but for sure with farm raised seafoods, because they're all stuck in, the where they're being raised, like if one fish is sick, and it's still in there, it could potentially contaminate all the fish in there. And same thing like with the foods that they're eating, if like the fish feed has contaminants in it or has like toxins in it, then all of them are going to have it. So that's one of the reasons why, if you're able to avoid farm-raised seafood, that you would avoid the risk of being exposed to those toxins. Whereas wild caught, they're just roaming free in the oceans and eating the foods that they're naturally supposed to. So that usually means that they're eating more variety of things and getting more variety of nutrients into their own bodies. So when we're eating wild caught seafood, we tend to get more variety of nutrients through that route than to get farm raised. One thing I will say about salmon, if it says Atlantic salmon, there's no such thing as wild caught Atlantic. So even if it doesn't say farm raised, if it says Atlantic salmon, it is definitely farm raised. So just another buzzword to look for. when buying organic is not possible, there are things you can do at home to kind of scrub and rinse the toxins out. So here's an article from WikiHow on different ways you can wash your produce. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to go to the supermarket and buy a fancy vegetable cleanser of any sort. You could really just use vinegar, salt, and maybe baking soda. And those are very common items and cheap items that you could have at home to help wash some of the toxins out of the food. And then other guides, this Flav City, a YouTuber, he has a lot of interesting videos. If you're interested in knowing like what foods to look for at a grocery store, he actually goes to individual grocery stores. Like he'll do a video on what to buy at Costco or what to avoid at Costco, because you know these are the words on the packaging that tells me that this is a good product, and these are the buzzwords on this package that tells me it's complete garbage. They're lying to you if they say it's healthy because XYZ, that kind of stuff. And then there's another article, website, Eat Wild, just more resources for you to look at. I will actually temporarily unshare this screen for a moment because I forgot to add something to my slides, and I wanted to talk about reading labels in packaged products. So we'll see how this goes. I don't have the unhealthy stuff in my pantry anymore, so we'll see how it goes. But I wanted to caution everyone, when you're buying packaged goods, if you look at the label, it says gluten-free, or say like low sugar or low sodium, fat-free, blah, blah, whatever. They make it very marketable because if they put it across the brand, right? Like this is gluten-free, so therefore you assume that it might be healthy. But what I want to encourage people to do is actually take a deeper dive into this and look more closely at the packaging, not only for the words across the front, but look at the nutrient label and then look at the ingredients. So even though this label says that there's no added sugar, right, somewhere, hold on. Yeah, dietary sugar, it says 0 and then 0 added sugar. But when you read the label, dextrose is actually one of the ingredients. So what does that tell me? This actually has sugar in it, even though they didn't call it sugar, they called it something else. They called it dextrose in this case. So there's a lot with looking at the labels for you to pick up on clues of what's actually good and what's not good. So I encourage you to not just look at the face of a package, but also read the ingredients. Let's see if I have another example. So this soy sauce says it's naturally brewed, so you assume it's good. But then when you read the ingredients, there is a potassium sorbate in there, which is a preservative. And that is actually it's not a naturally occurring chemical. So having too much of that in your system could cause some reactions. And yeah, so just things like that. I wish I had better examples of bad ingredients, but that was the closest thing I could find. Just when you're not, aside from looking at the things that I recommended for the produce, and also just, when you're buying packaged goods, make sure you're reading the labels and reading them very carefully, because there are buzzwords in the ingredients list that might be hiding something that you don't know. And if you're not sure about an ingredient like dextrose, I think a typical consumer might not know that that's sugar. If any words seem foreign to you, then just Google it really quick. And I think ewg.org actually has a very good app and a very good searchable platform where if you just type in the name of a chemical you're not sure about, they'll populate a ton of research articles to tell you what's good or what's bad about it, if it's actually safe, or if there's any concerns about that product. Any questions up to this point? No. Okay, so I downloaded this from the EWG website. It's the Dirty Dozens for this year and the Clean 15s. So there's a hyperlink to this as well so that you can get the exact same copy of this. It's made so that it's like a business card size when you cut it out and fold it so that you can keep it in your wallet or keep it in your purse. When you go grocery shopping, you'll have the list ready and you'll know what food to avoid, that you definitely want to get organic, which are these 12. Always, always, always buy organic for these. And then these 15 down here, if you can't get it organic, these are probably the safest ones to get not organic and not worry too much about pesticides.
Sorry, can you just define what Clean 15 means again? Is that they are grown without pesticides?
Everything has pesticides, even organic. It's probably going to have some exposure of pesticides just because the farms are very close to each other. So if it gets too windy, like the pesticides from one farm might blow over to the next farm, things like that. So everything will have some amount of pesticides in it. We can't avoid it completely, but this website did a really good job of coming up with a report of ranking every single produce. And so the Dirty Dozen is the 12 with the most pesticide tested in the product. And then the Clean 15 is the one with the least amount of pesticides tested when they run it through the lab and do all of that. And this is after they've already like scrubbed it and peeled it and all of that. There's still traces of pesticides in these products. So like I said, it's kind of like the water bucket analogy. Having a little bit in your system is not terrible. Your body has the capability of purging most of it. But if you're constantly introducing pesticides and chemicals to your body, then eventually your body is going to be frustrated and kind of give up. So if you buy organic for the Dirty Dozens, if you can buy organic for everything, that's even better. But if you can't, then definitely buy organic for the Dirty Dozens. And then the Clean 15 are the ones that you can feel more at ease if you don't get to buy organic for those.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last part of my talk is what you can do at home to support your immune system, because some of these tricks are so stupid easy that I wish I knew about it longer. Right here is a podcast from Dr. Paul Anderson. He did a whole series for cooking for immune support, and I linked each podcast to the parts. I'm only gonna briefly talk about the first part, and then the other 3 parts you can listen to on your own time. But and then here's a link to his website where he has a ton of free resources for all the research that he's come across and all the different studies that he personally worked on to talk about nutrition and medicine in general. So the first part of his talk was about how to make vegetable stock, and you can actually do that with the scraps from all the vegetables that you normally cut anyways. You don't have to throw any of it away. So you'll see in my pot right here, it's like the top of the tips of like the bell pepper, the scallion, the ends of the garlic, onion, that kind of stuff, the tips of, you know, your carrots and celery, and even like the peel, like the skin of the garlic, you can save all of that. Like just because those things are not fun for us to eat doesn't mean that they don't have nutrients in them. So what you can do is actually save all those scraps, put it in a freezer bag, like a gallon size one, and then when that bag is full, you have enough scraps to make stock with it. One of the things he talks about is why we want to do that, and that's because I don't know if I want to go that way. Okay, so the way that you do it is, you just empty that frozen bag of scraps into a pot, fill it with water, and then add some vinegar and salt to it. And the reason for that is that you want to increase you want to change the pH of the water to help the nutrients flow out better. And with the salt, you're changing the osmolarity of it so that things can flow out easier. And then you just simmer it for an hour to 3 hours if you really want to. And then you strain all the solid parts. This is what I had left by the end of straining. And the scraps at that point, if you like to compost, you could just add it to your compost and make another use out of it. If you don't have a green thumb like I don't, then that's when you could throw it away. But at least you know you've extracted every piece of nutrient out of your food before you before you toss it. Especially if you're gonna go to the route of buying organic foods and they tend to be more expensive, then this is a really easy trick to just get more out of what you invested in, you know? And then once you're done straining everything, I filled these jars up, these mason jars up, and then put them in the freezer. And then I always leave one jar in the refrigerator side, so whenever I need to use it, it's available. And then the rest, they just stay frozen until I need to use them. And then there's a link here on tips on how to freeze properly, because I've made the mistake of cracking a ton of glasses. So don't make my mistakes and follow the tips on there. And so why make vegetable stock? Because once you've extracted that, you have a base for you to use on practically anything and enhance whatever food you're already gonna cook with even more nutrients. So for example, if you're gonna cook white rice, instead of cooking it with regular water, you can cook it with this vegetable stock. Now your rice is enhanced with more nutrients than it would have had you just used regular water. And you could do this with anything. If anything that requires you adding water to the recipe, I would substitute with stock just to give it more nutrients. So really easy way to add to your recipes. And worst case scenario, even if you're like you don't want to cook at all, this is ready to drink on its own. Like you could just take it out of the refrigerator, heat it up really quick and just drink it like regular soup or regular broth. If you want to make it more medicinal, then you can use this as a base and add herbs to it and make a medicinal broth. So there's a lot of variety. I think in Dr. Anderson's podcast, he even talked about making mashed potatoes. So instead of pouring milk into the mashed potatoes to give it its creamy texture, you can just add a little bit of stock to it and it'll give it more nutrients. So that's the benefit of doing this. He also goes into all the mechanisms and all the science of why everything about this is so magical, and I'll leave you to listen to him to have him explain it better than me. But yeah, there's a talk of this about how if you were to do bone broth, what adjustments you would need to make. And then he talks about extracting nutrients out of mushrooms to make a sauce out of it. And then there's a podcast about him going over all the spices that we use conventionally and the health benefits of those. Because one thing that he did mention was that with herbs and spices, if you trace it back to ancient times, like even with the Native Americans who lived here, like we use these spices mainly to help prevent it. They have a lot of antimicrobial properties and biofilm disrupting properties. So when you add these herbs to your food, it makes it easier for your body to digest because you don't run the risk of getting infected by bacteria or by having all the bad bacteria in your gut and not enough good bacteria. So he goes into a lot of details about that. and how simple it is to just, add a little teaspoon of salt or add a little teaspoon of vinegar, or, add a little bit of oregano to this, and it'll change the medicinal property of your food that easily. Is there any questions up to this point?
Yes. Does the vegetable stock have a strong flavor? Like if you replaced water with in different dishes, would it affect the taste of the final dish?
So the way that this is made, it doesn't really have a strong flavor at all, because the goal of making this stock is to get the nutrients out, not so much to get the flavors out. So unless you're throwing a ton of herbs, like aromatic herbs, into that pot to begin with, then it's probably going to be a very mild stock. But with every batch, because you're using different scraps every time, it'll come out differently. So I can't say 100% of the time that it's not aromatic and that it's not strong at all in the flavor, but I'll say at least for this particular batch that I took a picture of, it was very bland. Like I still needed to add salt and add other spices to my food in addition to the stock when I was cooking with it.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Okay, so here's just example of everything that I kind of talked about. So with the ratios in the beginning, half of the plate being veggies and fruit, a quarter protein, and a quarter carbs. And then trying to get 5 colors a day. With this one meal alone, I already got 4 colors checked off. So I think I had a little bowl of blueberries after that, and that was my 5th color. So like the suggestions that I'm offering you today, it's very simple. You don't have to cram it all into one meal, but I just wanted to show you that within one meal, it is very possible to get different colors on your plate. I think this, can you see my pointer, by the way? Because I can't
Yes, we
tell.
can.
Okay, so with this dish, they call it a Buddha bowl, but what it is basically whatever you have in your pantry, use it. So my base of this dish was quinoa, and then I had a layer of kale, and then whatever vegetables and beans I had that day. So there was like avocado, carrots, squash, chickpeas, whatever. I just made rows of it. And then there's a mango sauce on top of that. And that was very filling on its own. So just experiment with what you have, and you can create some very colorful and interesting dishes. Even with my smoothie, I don't know if you can see, but half of my smoothies are vegetables. So I think this is purple cabbage, and then I had mixed berries in there, some chia seeds and flax seeds, a handful of nuts, usually almonds is the first thing I grab, and then just blend that up. So your smoothie can have a variety of nutrients in that as well. And I'm a very lazy cook. If I can cook in batches and not have to watch the stove or anything, I'm all about that. So here's an example of me making a pot roast where I kind of sauteed all these vegetables, then I seared the beef, and I put the beef in the pot, covered it with these vegetables, and then covered that with potatoes, and then poured some vegetable stock in there, and I just set it, and I didn't have to deal with it until we were ready for dinner. So really easy dishes for you to do where you don't have to pay attention to the temperature of the food, or you just kind of set everything and then forget about it, go work on other things, and then come back to it at the end of the day, and you have all major food groups in one pot ready to go. And then these are a few resources that I turn to quite frequently for recipe ideas. The first one is Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He actually has a whole book about why we should transition to plant-based. I don't know that I personally would go so far to say that everyone should go 100% plant, and only eat plants and avoid animals altogether. But I will say that he has a lot of good talking points as to why you should make the majority of your plate fruits and vegetables and plant-based, and then just leave a very small fraction of it, your animal protein. This link right here is the book that he talks about everything, and then this link right here is his cookbook with actual recipes that follows the philosophies of his Eat to Live recommendation. Domestic Geek, she has, yeah, it's just a good resource for different recipe ideas. This is the link to Inspired Eat, and then this is the link to her YouTube channel. So there's a lot of tutorials, a lot of meal prep videos and things like that for you to look at. Mind Over Munch, same thing. This is a link to her website. This is the link to her YouTube channel. Tasty, the website for all the recipes, and then the YouTube channel for all the video tutorials. Tasty, I will caution, is not always, actually with all of these, they're not always the healthiest recipes. Sometimes they do, make foods that are not always healthy. So you have to kind of go in there and search specifically for healthier things. Like you can put in a filter to say like, you want only dairy-free recipes, or you want only gluten-free recipes and things like that. When you put in that filter, then you'll see all the healthier stuff, and then they'll leave out the less healthy stuff. But I do like including Tasty in my recommendations just because they are really good at making everything look really easy to cook, and none of it takes very much time, and that's what I personally am all about. Like the less work, less time, less ingredients that I have to prepare, the better, and Tasty is really good at that. And then My Plate Kitchen is actually from the USDA website. They actually have a whole section with same thing, with the recipes, with the video tutorials, with articles about the nutrients of different foods, how to talk to kids and get kids involved in cooking with you, that kind of thing. So again, this is the website link, and then this is the YouTube playlist of their videos. Any questions about this? No? And so in conclusion, just to recap everything that I talked about, first and foremost, if you don't want to change anything else about your diet, the bare minimum that I would recommend is to change the ratio of your macronutrients. Eat all the same food you still want to eat, but just change the ratio so that you're getting more vegetables and fruits of that thing, as opposed to the carbs. If you can, look for 5 different colors of food to try every day. And this is all natural colors of food, not like things with food coloring in it. That's cheating. That doesn't count. If drink more water in your life. So and aim for at least half of your body weight in ounces. So if you're a 150-pound person, you should be drinking at least 75 ounces of water every day. To get the most out of your groceries, follow all the tips that I mentioned. Buy organic if you can. Look at the packaging labels. Make sure that they didn't hide any secret ingredients that you didn't know about before you buy the food. And then don't let anything go to waste. Save all the scraps. Make broth out of it, and then use that broth to cook everything else. And then that'll give you an extra boost of nutrients in foods that you were already gonna make, just by adding stock to it instead of water. And then, as always, these are very, very general recommendations. If you have any specific health concerns or very specific goals that you want to accomplish, seek a trained healthcare professional and get their recommendation for how to steer you in your very specific situation. Because it is okay to go keto if you want to. It is okay to be vegetarian, and that kind of thing. But you want to have a trained professional kind of coach you along the way and make sure that you're getting a well-balanced diet, even if you're wanting to stick with those types of protocols. Okay, thank you.